Arizona Territory, 1875. The unforgiving summer sun beat down on Yancy Young as he surveyed the scorched landscape from atop his dun-colored stallion. At 25, he had already developed the hard edges that defined men of the frontier, eyes that squinted against more than just the sun, shoulders squared against the weight of solitude. His lean frame carried only what was necessary: a Colt revolver, canteen, and the stubborn belief that a man survived the West by keeping to himself. "Come on, Kaiser," he urged his horse forward, pulling his hat lower to shield against the glaring sun. "Still got daylight to burn." The cattle drive had ended 3 days ago, leaving Yancy with his pay and the same empty feeling that followed him from town to town. The other cowboys had headed straight for Tucson's saloons and brothels, but Yancy had different plans. He intended to stake a small claim northeast of town, build something that might last longer than the fleeting connections of trail life. "A man relies on no one out here," he muttered, an article of faith repeated so often it had become prayer. "Attachments get you buried." He had learned this lesson at 16 when Apache raiders killed his family while he was away hunting. By the time he returned, there was nothing left but smoldering ruins and 3 fresh graves to dig. In the 9 years since, Yancy had perfected the art of transience, moving from ranch to ranch, never lingering long enough to form bonds that could be severed. The setting sun cast long shadows across the desert floor as Yancy approached a small creek. He dismounted, allowing Kaiser to drink while he refilled his canteen. The water's surface reflected a young face weathered beyond its years, handsome still, with clear blue eyes and 3 days of stubble that he'd soon shave clean. His dark hair curled damply at the nape of his neck. "We'll make camp here," he decided, unloading his bedroll. "Tomorrow we'll reach that plot of land, see if it's worth the investment." As he gathered kindling for a small fire, gunshots echoed in the distance. Yancy froze, listening, 3 shots in quick succession, then silence. His instinct was to ignore it, not his business, not his fight, but something made him hesitate. The shots had come from the direction of his intended destination. "Damn it all," he muttered, securing Kaiser to a sturdy mesquite and checking his Colt. Against his better judgment, he moved quietly toward the disturbance, staying low among the brush. The sound led him to a small clearing where a camp had been established. 2 men lay motionless on the ground. A third man, rough-looking with a scraggly beard, was ransacking supplies while keeping a rifle trained on a young woman bound to a wagon wheel. Even in the fading light, Yancy could see she was Apache. Her long black hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and she wore a simple dress that blended traditional elements with frontier practicality. Her fierce dark eyes tracked the man's movements without a trace of fear, though blood trickled from a cut on her cheek. "I told you we'd get good money for you in Mexico," the man growled. "Pretty half-breed like you fetches top dollar. Shame about your friends, though. Should have just cooperated." The woman's response came in clear, perfect English. "Touch me again and I will ensure your death is neither quick nor dignified, Jesse Patton." Yancy assessed the situation quickly. The man, Jesse, was preoccupied and sloppy, likely drunk. The woman clearly knew him by name, suggesting this was personal. Everything in Yancy screamed to walk away. Not his fight, not his problem, but something in the woman's defiant stance spoke to him. She wasn't begging or cowering. She was calculating, waiting for her moment despite overwhelming odds. When Jesse turned to grab a bottle from his saddlebag, Yancy made his move. He stepped into the clearing, Colt raised. "Evening," he said calmly. "Seems to me the lady isn't interested in your company." Jesse spun around, fumbling for his rifle. "Who the hell are you? This ain't your concern, cowboy." "I'm making it my concern." Yancy kept his voice even. "Drop the weapon." The standoff lasted only seconds before Jesse made his decision, swinging his rifle toward Yancy. The Colt in Yancy's hand fired once and Jesse crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. "You shot me," he wailed. "You shot me over some Apache whore." Yancy approached carefully, kicking away Jesse's weapon. "Watch your mouth, next one goes somewhere more permanent." He bound Jesse's wound roughly, then tied him to a tree before turning his attention to the woman. Up close he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 22 or 23. Her face was a striking blend of Apache heritage and what might have been Mexican or Spanish ancestry. Despite her situation, she held herself with unmistakable dignity. "Are you hurt?" Yancy asked, holstering his weapon and approaching slowly. Her eyes assessed him cautiously. "Nothing serious." The others were not so fortunate. She nodded toward the bodies on the ground. "Who were they?" Yancy pulled out his knife to cut her bindings. "My escort, my father sent them." Her voice caught slightly, but she steadied it. "I am Juana Aguilar. My father is Miguel Aguilar. He owns the Double A ranch north of here." Yancy had heard of the Double A. Miguel Aguilar was a wealthy rancher who had married an Apache woman years ago, causing quite a scandal at the time. "Yancy Young," he offered, slicing through the ropes. What was Jesse's plan here? Juana rubbed her wrists as she stood. "To sell me to a brothel across the border. He worked for my father until he was caught stealing. He blamed me for exposing him." Her eyes hardened. "He and his friends ambushed us on our return from Tucson." Yancy glanced at Jesse, who was now unconscious from pain and blood loss. "He'll need a doctor, and the law should hear about this." "Yes." Juana moved to check on her escorts, confirming what they already knew. Both men were dead. She closed their eyes gently, whispering something in Apache. When she looked up at Yancy, her eyes were dry but filled with resolve. "I need to return to my father's ranch. It's a day's ride north." Yancy shifted uncomfortably. His plan had been to inspect his potential land claim, not escort a young woman across dangerous territory. Attachments were liabilities, responsibilities even more so. "I can help you bury your men and take this scum to the nearest town with a sheriff," he offered as compromise. "But then I have business to attend to." Juana studied him with unsettling intensity. "You are heading north to look at land near Rattlesnake Creek." Yancy stiffened. "How could you know that?" "Because the land you seek is part of my father's property." A small, ironic smile touched her lips. "The deed was recently made available through the land office, but it has been Aguilar land for 15 years. The revelation hit Yancy like a physical blow. His one chance at putting down roots, at building something permanent, was already gone. "There must be some mistake," he began, but Juana was already shaking her head. "No mistake, but I propose an arrangement, Mr. Young. Help me return safely to my father's ranch, and I will personally show you other parcels of land equally suitable for purchase, land that is actually available." Yancy weighed his options. He could walk away now, find another plot somewhere else, maintain his solitude, but good land with water access was increasingly rare, and Juana Aguilar was offering him insider knowledge. "One day's ride," he confirmed reluctantly. "One day," Juana nodded. "We can bring Jesse to the way station at Coyote Pass. There's a marshal who stops there regularly." As they buried the escorts with as much dignity as possible, Yancy watched Juana from the corner of his eye. She moved with purpose and efficiency, displaying none of the fragility he might have expected after such an ordeal. When they finished, she performed what appeared to be traditional Apache burial rites, her voice strong and melodic in the gathering darkness. They made camp that night a safe distance from the burial site, with Jesse securely bound and semi-conscious nearby. Yancy kept his distance, maintaining a respectful silence as Juana prepared a simple meal from her salvaged supplies. "You do not talk much, Mr. Young," she observed, offering him a plate of beans and jerky. "Not much to say." He accepted the food with a nod of thanks. "Yet you intervened when many would have passed by." Her dark eyes reflected the firelight. "That speaks volumes." Yancy shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that is not true." Juana wrapped a blanket around her shoulders against the desert night's chill. 3 men against 1 woman. Most would calculate those odds and continue riding. Yancy had no response. She was right, of course. Most men would have minded their own business. He wasn't entirely sure why he hadn't done the same. "You were heading to that land to start a ranch?" she asked after a while. "Small homestead," he corrected, "just a place of my own." "You travel alone, no family?" "Not anymore." His tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate. Juana respected his reticence, falling quiet for a time. "I lost my mother 5 years ago. Fever took her quickly. My father nearly died from grief." Yancy looked up, surprised by her openness. "I'm sorry." They loved each other completely, despite everything society said about a Spanish rancher and an Apache woman. A small smile played at her lips. Their story is something of a legend in these parts. Must have been difficult for you, Yancy said, thinking of the prejudice that ran through the territory like a poisonous river. At times, Juana's gaze was direct, unapologetic, but their love gave me strength. It showed me what is possible when people choose connection over fear. Her words struck an uncomfortable chord in Yancy. Connection over fear, the very opposite of how he had chosen to live. Get some rest, he said abruptly, standing to check on their prisoner. We have a long ride tomorrow. Morning came with the piercing clarity unique to the desert. Yancy had slept poorly, troubled by unwelcome thoughts about paths not taken and the emptiness of his carefully constructed solitude. Juana, by contrast, seemed refreshed and focused as they prepared to depart. They secured Jesse to his own horse, his wounded shoulder bandaged but clearly painful. The man had regained consciousness but remained sullenly silent under Yancy's watchful eye. They reached Coyote Pass by midday and delivered Jesse to the grizzled station master, who confirmed that Marshal Davies would arrive the following morning. After providing statements about the attack and the deaths of Juana's escorts, they continued northward. Tell me about yourself, Mr. Young, Juana said as they rode side by side across the expansive landscape. What brings a man to seek solitude in such harsh country? Yancy considered deflecting but found himself answering honestly. The usual story: had a family once, lost them. Decided attachments weren't worth the pain. Juana absorbed this with respectful silence before responding. Among my mother's people, grief is not something to be avoided but honored. Each loss becomes part of who we are. Sounds like a recipe for a life of sorrow, Yancy commented, or a life of meaning. She guided her horse around a patch of prickly pear cactus. To feel deeply is not a weakness, Mr. Young, it is courage. The conversation shifted to more practical matters: water sources, grazing quality, the challenges of ranching in the territory. Yancy was surprised by Juana's knowledge. She spoke with the authority of someone who had been deeply involved in her father's ranching operations. My father has no sons, she explained when he remarked on her expertise. He taught me everything about running the AA. Some of his vaqueros resisted at first, but they have learned to respect my judgment. As they traveled, Juana pointed out landmarks and boundaries, occasionally indicating parcels of land that might be available for purchase. Yancy found himself genuinely interested, asking questions about soil quality and access rights. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, a real home, a purpose. Late afternoon brought them to a ridge overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, the buildings of the AA spread out like a small village, substantial and well-maintained. My father's ranch, Juana announced with undisguised pride. We will be there before sunset. As they descended toward the valley, a group of riders appeared from a canyon to their left. Yancy tensed, his hand moving to his weapon, but Juana raised her arm in greeting. Double amen, she assured him. They are looking for me. The riders galloped toward them, led by a powerfully built man with silver-streaked black hair and a face lined by sun and worry. His relief at seeing Juana was palpable. Juana. Thank God, he pulled his horse alongside hers, reaching out to touch her cheek where a bruise had formed. When your escorts did not return, I feared the worst. I am well, father, she reassured him, thanks to Mr. Young. Miguel Aguilar turned his attention to Yancy, assessing him with keen eyes. You have my eternal gratitude, sir. Please come to our home. I insist you stay as our honored guest. Yancy's instinct was to decline, to maintain his distance as he always had, but something in Juana's expression, a mixture of hope and challenge, made him reconsider. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Aguilar, he heard himself say. I'd be honored to accept. The Double A ranch house was impressive, a sprawling adobe structure that combined Spanish architectural elements with frontier practicality. Inside, it was surprisingly refined, with polished wooden floors, quality furniture, and walls adorned with both European paintings and traditional Apache artwork. Miguel Aguilar listened intently as Juana recounted their ordeal, his expression darkening at the mention of Jesse Patton. I should have dealt with him more permanently when I had the chance, he said grimly, but the law will have him now. Dinner was an elaborate affair, with several ranch hands and a housekeeper joining them at a long table laden with food. Yancy felt acutely out of place among the easy camaraderie, answering questions politely but briefly when addressed. He noticed Juana watching him throughout the meal, her expression thoughtful. When the others retired to the front room for coffee, she beckoned him to follow her instead to a small courtyard garden. "You are uncomfortable with company," she observed as they sat on a stone bench beneath a trellis of flowering vines. "Not used to it," Yancy admitted. "Yet you handle yourself well. There is kindness in you that you try to hide." Her directness was unsettling. "You don't know me, Miss Aguilar. I know you risked your life for a stranger. I know you treated me with respect when many would not. I know your eyes hold more sorrow than anger." She leaned slightly closer. "And I know you are afraid of finding a place where you might belong." Yancy stood abruptly. "I should turn in. Long day tomorrow." Juana remained seated, undeterred. "Tomorrow I will show you the Eastern Valley. There is land there that might suit your needs, and it is definitely available for purchase." He nodded stiffly before retreating to the guest room assigned to him. Inside, he paced the floor, unsettled by Juana's perceptiveness and his own inexplicable reactions. He had maintained his emotional distance for nearly a decade, yet one day in this woman's company had him questioning everything. "This is temporary," he reminded himself. "Look at the land, make a decision, move on, alone. The way it should be." But as he finally lay down to sleep, Yancy couldn't shake the image of Juana's knowing eyes or the strange sense that he was standing at a crossroads he hadn't seen coming. Morning brought renewed focus. Yancy joined Miguel Aguilar for breakfast, where the rancher spread out maps of his holdings. "This eastern section," Miguel indicated, "is separate from my main operation. Good water, decent grazing. I acquired it years ago but never developed it properly. If you're interested, we could discuss terms." "I appreciate that, sir," Yancy replied, studying the map with genuine interest. "Though I'm curious why you'd sell to a stranger." Miguel's weathered face broke into a smile. "You saved my daughter's life, Mr. Young. In my book, that makes you someone worth knowing." He rolled up the map. "Besides, Juana speaks highly of you, and she is an excellent judge of character." Before Yancy could respond, Juana entered, dressed for riding in a practical split skirt and cotton blouse, her long black hair braided down her back. At 23, she possessed a confidence that drew the eye, not just beauty, though she had that in abundance, but a centered quality rare in anyone, man or woman. "Ready to see your potential empire?" she asked with a teasing smile. They set out with 2 ranch hands as escorts, riding east across the vast Aguilar holdings. Juana proved to be an excellent guide, pointing out natural features and explaining the seasonal patterns of the territory. By midday, they had reached a verdant valley nestled between low hills. "This is it," Juana announced, reining in her horse at an overlook. 1,500 acres with year-round water from that spring. She pointed to where a creek wound through the valley floor. "My father purchased it from a discouraged settler heading back east. We've used it only for occasional grazing." Yancy surveyed the land with a critical eye. It was better than he had hoped for, better than the plot he'd originally sought. "Good grass, natural boundaries, defensible position. It's a fine piece of land," he acknowledged. "Likely more than I can afford." "Perhaps we can arrange terms," Juana suggested. "My father values good neighbors more than quick profit." They spent the afternoon exploring the valley. Yancy found himself opening up as they rode, sharing his knowledge of cattle and land management. Juana listened attentively, offering insights of her own that reflected her unique perspective, Spanish ranching techniques blended with Apache understanding of the desert ecosystem. "You'd make a fine rancher in your own right," Yancy observed as they watered their horses at the spring. "Perhaps someday." Juana's expression turned contemplative. "Though finding a husband who sees me as a partner rather than a curiosity has proven challenging." "Their loss," Yancy said without thinking, then felt heat rise to his face at her surprised look. A sudden shout from one of their escorts interrupted the moment. The man was pointing toward the hills, where a cloud of dust indicated approaching riders. "We're not expecting anyone," Juana said, instantly alert. "And that's not the direction of the ranch." Yancy's hand went to his Colt. "How many men does Jesse Patton run with?" Juana's eyes widened. 5 or 6 usually. "You think?" "If he escaped custody or had friends waiting," Yancy scanned the terrain for defensive positions. We need to move now. They mounted quickly, but before they could retreat, riders appeared on the ridge above them. Even at a distance, Yancy recognized Jessie Patton's stocky figure. There she is, Jessie's voice carried across the valley. Told you they'd bring her out here. Juana's face hardened. 6 of them. 2 of our men plus us. We don't stand and fight, Yancy decided. We make for that narrow canyon, force them to come at a single file if they follow. They spurred their horses toward the western edge of the valley, where a narrow defile cut between rocky cliffs. Behind them, Jessie and his men gave chase, gunshots kicking up dust around them. Keep going, Yancy called to Juana as they entered the canyon. To the ranch hands he shouted, one of you ride for help. The other stay with Miss Aguilar. The younger hand immediately broke away, riding hard toward the main ranch. The older vaquero positioned himself protectively near Juana. Yancy pulled up at a bend in the canyon, dismounting and drawing his rifle from its scabbard. I'll slow them down, get to safety. I will not leave you here, Juana declared, dismounting as well. To his surprise, she pulled a revolver from her saddlebag. I can shoot, Mr. Young, better than most men. There was no time to argue. The first of Jessie's men appeared at the canyon mouth, and Yancy fired a warning shot that sent the rider scrambling for cover. They'll think twice about charging in blind, he said, reloading quickly. For nearly an hour, they maintained their position, exchanging occasional fire with Jessie's gang. The narrow canyon provided excellent defense, but Yancy knew they were effectively trapped unless help arrived from the ranch. What does Jessie want? He asked during a lull in the shooting. Seems like a lot of trouble just for revenge. Juana's expression was grim. My father's land, Jessie believes he knows of gold deposits in the eastern section, this very valley we're in. He tried to forge documents last year claiming rights to it. And now he figures if he has you, he has leverage. Yancy peered around the bend. They're getting bolder, moving up the canyon. A bullet ricocheted off the rock near Juana's head, showering her with stone fragments. Yancy pulled her deeper into cover, suddenly aware of her proximity as she pressed against him. Are you hit? He asked urgently. No, her eyes met his, unflinching despite the danger, but they are closing in. Yancy made a decision. I'm going to draw their fire. When I do, you and Ramirez head further up the canyon. There might be a way out at the top. That is suicide, Juana protested. We stay together. Someone has to make it back to warn your father that Jessie is after the land. Yancy checked his ammunition grimly. Besides, I work better alone. Juana studied his face for a long moment. No, you do not, Yancy Young. You have simply convinced yourself of that because it feels safer. She laid her hand on his arm. We face this together or not at all. The unexpectedness of her touch, the firmness of her words, left Yancy momentarily speechless. Before he could respond, the sound of multiple gunshots echoed from the canyon entrance. More of them, Ramirez wondered aloud, but Juana was smiling. No, listen. Yancy strained to hear over the gunfire, then he caught it, the distinctive whistle used by the double A hands to signal each other. Your father's men, he realized. Manuel made it through. Juana's relief was palpable. Jessie's men are caught between us now. The shooting intensified briefly, then fell silent. Cautiously, Yancy peered around their cover. At the canyon mouth, Miguel Aguilar and at least a dozen armed ranch hands had Jessie's gang surrounded and disarmed. It's over, he told Juana, holstering his weapon. Your father's here. The reunion between father and daughter was emotional. Miguel embraced Juana fiercely before turning to Yancy with profound gratitude. Twice now you have protected my most precious treasure, he said, gripping Yancy's hand. There are not enough words to express my thanks. Jessie and his men were bound and loaded onto horses for transport to the territorial marshal. The would-be land thief glared at Yancy with undisguised hatred. You'll regret crossing me, cowboy, he spat. A man like you all alone, accidents happen. He is not alone, Juana said clearly, stepping to Yancy's side. He is under the protection of the Aguilar ranch now. As they rode back to the Double A, Yancy found himself unusually reflective. The events of the past days had forced him into precisely the kind of entanglement he had spent years avoiding. Yet instead of the vulnerability he had feared, he felt something unexpected, a sense of rightness, of connection. That evening, after a celebration dinner with the ranch hands who had come to their rescue, Yancy found himself once again in the courtyard garden with Juana. The night was clear, stars spreading across the desert sky in breathtaking profusion. "My father wants you to stay," Juana said without preamble. "He has offered you the position of foreman if you're interested." Yancy was taken aback. "Foreman? I came looking to buy a small plot, not run someone else's ranch." "The offer to sell you the Eastern Valley stands as well." Juana's gaze was direct, challenging. "But he believes, as do I, that you have skills this ranch needs, and perhaps this ranch has something you need as well." "And what might that be?" Yancy asked, though something in him already knew the answer. "A place to belong." Juana stepped closer. "People who value you not despite your willingness to care, but because of it." The moonlight silvered her features, highlighting the quiet strength in her expression. Yancy felt the carefully constructed walls of his solitude beginning to crumble. "I've spent 9 years believing that caring for people was a weakness I couldn't afford," he admitted. "That connection's only led to pain." And now, her question hung between them. "Now I'm not so sure." He met her gaze directly. "Meeting you has complicated things." A smile touched her lips. "Good. Life should be complicated, Mr. Young. That is how we know we are truly living it." In that moment, with startling clarity, Yancy recognized the choice before him. He could retreat to the safety of isolation, or he could step forward into the unknown territory of connection with all its risks and rewards. "I'd like to see more of that Eastern Valley," he said finally. "And maybe discuss your father's offer." Juana's smile deepened. "I was hoping you would say that." The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Yancy agreed to serve as temporary foreman while considering the land purchase. He threw himself into ranch operations, working closely with Miguel to understand the scope of the double enterprise. The work was challenging but satisfying, allowing him to use skills he had developed over years of drifting. Jesse Patton and his gang faced trial in Tucson, ultimately receiving lengthy sentences for murder and kidnapping. The threat they had posed faded, though Yancy remained vigilant, aware that frontiers harbored many dangers. Throughout it all, Juana was a constant presence. They worked side by side during the days, her knowledge of the ranch complementing his broader cattle experience. In the evenings, they often found themselves in conversation that stretched into the night, discovering shared values beneath their different experiences. "You never speak of your family," Juana observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching a desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Yancy was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally he said, "They were everything to me, my parents, my younger sister. We had a small place near the Gila River." His voice grew distant with memory. "I was hunting when Apache raiders came through. By the time I returned, it was too late." Juana's expression filled with compassion. "Which band?" "What?" "Which Apache band? We are many peoples, not one." Yancy looked uncomfortable. "I don't know." "Does it matter?" "It matters because hatred should be specific, not general." Her voice was gentle but firm. "My mother was Chiricahua. We were often at war with the Aravaipa. To say Apache raiders is like saying white men, without distinguishing between kind and cruel individuals." The observation struck Yancy with unexpected force. For years, he had carried a shapeless anger toward all Apache people, an anger that had begun to dissolve only upon meeting Juana. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I just locked it all away, the grief, the anger, everything. And in doing so, locked away the capacity for joy as well." Juana's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "That is too high a price, Yancy." The warmth of her touch spread through him like water through parched earth. For the first time in nearly a decade, Yancy allowed himself to feel the full measure of his loss, not as a reopening of old wounds, but as an acknowledgement of the love that had shaped him. "My sister would have been about your age now," he said softly. "She was fearless like you, never backed down from anything." Juana's fingers tightened around his. "Tell me more about her." And so he did, releasing memories long suppressed, his father's laugh, his mother's garden, his sister's wild dreams. Each recollection was both painful and healing, like setting a broken bone so it could mend properly. As summer turned to fall, Yancy made his decision. He would purchase the eastern valley but maintain his position as foreman of the main ranch. The dual role would be challenging, but with Miguel's support, he believed he could build something lasting. The day he signed the deed to his new property, Juana accompanied him to the site. They stood together overlooking land that was now his, watching the play of light and shadow across the valley floor. "What will you call it?" she asked. Yancy considered. "New beginning," he said finally. "It seems appropriate." Juana nodded approvingly. "A good name." She hesitated, then added, "Will you be lonely there?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Yancy turned to face her, suddenly certain of what he wanted to say. "That depends," he replied, taking her hands in his. "I've been thinking lately that a ranch needs more than one person to make it thrive." Juana's eyes widened slightly. "Are you offering a business partnership, Mr. Young?" "No," he drew a deep breath. "Juana Aguilar, I came to this territory believing I was meant to be alone. You showed me how wrong I was. If you would consider it, I'd like to court you properly, with your father's blessing." Joy illuminated her face. "I have been waiting for you to realize what I have known since that first day. We are better together than apart." Their first kiss was tentative, then deepened with shared certainty. When they finally broke apart, Yancy felt a sense of homecoming more profound than any he had known since losing his family. "Your father might have objections," he cautioned, suddenly aware of the social complications. A drifting cowboy with nothing but a newly purchased plot of land. Juana laughed. "My father married an Apache woman when everyone said it would ruin him. He believes in following one's heart above all else." Her expression grew serious. "But there will be others who disapprove. Are you prepared for that?" Yancy thought of the life he had lived, the emptiness of safety, the hollow victory of avoiding pain by avoiding connection. Then he looked at Juana with her courage and wisdom, her ability to bridge worlds and find strength in belonging to both. "Let them disapprove," he said with newfound conviction. "What we build together will speak louder than their prejudice." Miguel Aguilar received their news with tears of joy rather than objection. "I have watched you both these past months," he told them. "The ranch has never run more smoothly, and my daughter has never been happier. What father could ask for more?" Their courtship proceeded with the blessing of the Aguilar ranch community, though whispers from town occasionally reached them. Yancy discovered that the opinions of strangers mattered far less than he had imagined when weighed against the certainty of his feelings for Juana. Through the winter, they worked side by side, Yancy overseeing ranch operations while beginning construction on a modest home in his valley, Juana managing the books and helping plan for spring cattle operations. In the evenings, they shared dreams for their future, discovering the joy of planning a life together rather than merely surviving alone. Spring came to the territory in a riot of desert blooms, transforming the landscape with brief but spectacular color. On a perfect April morning, with the double of hands and neighboring ranchers in attendance, Yancy and Juana were married beneath a canopy of flowering mesquite. The ceremony blended traditions, Christian vows alongside Apache blessings, Juana in a white dress adorned with traditional beadwork, Yancy in a new suit that couldn't quite disguise the cowboy beneath. Miguel Aguilar wept openly as he gave his daughter away, while the ranch cook prepared a feast that would be remembered for years to come. As the celebration continued into the evening, Yancy led his bride away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Are you happy, Mrs. Young?" he asked, still marveling at the reality of their union. "Completely," Juana assured him, leaning into his embrace. "And you, do you ever regret opening your heart again?" Yancy looked out at the land that had once seemed so empty and unforgiving. Now he saw it differently, as a place of possibility, of connection, of life fully lived. "My only regret is the years I spent believing I had to face the world alone," he said softly. "You changed everything, Juana. You showed me that the very things I feared, attachment, caring, building a life with others, these are not weaknesses but strengths." "Then I have fulfilled my promise," she said with a smile. "What promise?" "The one I made to myself the day you saved me from Jesse Patton." Juana turned in his arms to face him. "I promised I would help the lonely cowboy discover he had been wrong about the frontier, that it is not a place where connections get you killed, but where they help you survive." Yancy laughed softly. You were that certain. I saw something in your eyes that you had forgotten was there, a capacity for love that no amount of loss could truly extinguish. Her hand rested against his chest. All it needed was someone willing to risk awakening it again. As the sun set on their wedding day, Yancy Young held his bride close, marveling at the journey that had brought him from isolated drifter to a man surrounded by connection. The double ranch spread out below them, and beyond it the eastern valley where they would build their home and raise their children. The frontier remained challenging, sometimes dangerous, but no longer empty. I love you, Juana Young, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for showing me the way home. 10 years later, the Young ranch, still called New Beginning, had prospered beyond Yancy's wildest dreams. The modest cabin had expanded into a comfortable home that echoed the blend of cultures that defined their family. 3 children filled the rooms with laughter, 2 boys and a girl who combined their parents' best qualities with their own unique spirits. Miguel Aguilar, now in his 70s but still vigorous, doted on his grandchildren and took pride in the thriving partnership between the AA and New Beginning ranches. Under the combined management of Yancy and Juana, their operations had become a model for the territory, demonstrating innovative techniques and fair treatment of workers. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Yancy and Juana rode together to the spot where he had first proposed. The valley had transformed, irrigated fields, healthy cattle, orchards beginning to bear fruit, yet the essential beauty of the landscape remained. Did you ever imagine this life? Juana asked as they dismounted near the spring that had first drawn Yancy to this land. Not once, he admitted, taking her hand. I came to Arizona territory looking for isolation and found connection instead. Looking for safety and found love. And which do you prefer? She teased, though she knew the answer. Yancy pulled her close, his once guarded heart now open and certain. There is no comparison. The man I was would pity the risks we've taken, the vulnerability of loving each other, our children, this community we've built. He wouldn't understand that in that vulnerability lies our greatest strength. As they looked out over the land they had nurtured together, Juana leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. Your promise changed everything, she said softly. My promise. The day you decided to stay, to try to open your heart again, it was a promise to believe in possibility rather than fear. Her eyes met his. It changed everything. Yancy nodded, understanding the truth of her words. His decision a decade ago had indeed been a kind of promise, to himself, to Juana, to the future they might build together. A cowboy's promise to an Apache woman that had defied all odds and created a life richer than either could have imagined alone. The best decision I ever made, he affirmed, sealing the words with a kiss as the Arizona sun bathed their land in golden light.